Hello friends and welcome to my channel. My name is Kathleen and here we talk about all things bookish, cozy, and self-care. And for today's video, we are going to talk about all the books that I read in January. So let's jump into it. Okay, so first things first, before we start jumping into and yapping about all the books that I read this past month, I want to kind of give you an overview of my reading stats and a recap of my reading stats for the month. Of course, if you want to get a more detailed breakdown, you can always visit my blog, which I will include the link to that blog post in the description box. And that way you can get all the detailed breakdown of my stats, my thoughts, my feelings, and more detailed review of the books that I read in January. But anyways, let's start talking about these stats. So, and when I do my stats, so I have a 2025 reading tracker, and this is where I keep track of my stats. I keep track of like my TBR, the new releases for the month, the books I'm gonna purchase for the month, the books that I do purchase, DNF, like all of that. So I got this off of Etsy and the store was Novelly Yours. I don't know if she still has these in stock, but if you're interested and you want a reading tracker like this, I highly encourage you to go to her store, check it out, and see if you can find this, because this thing is so awesome and I enjoy it so very much. Anyways, so we're gonna do the stats recap for January. And when it comes to total books read, I read a total of 14 books in January, which I met my goal of reading 14 books for January. So very happy about that. When it comes to total pages read for the month, I read 5,252 pages for January. So that number is definitely shy of my goal of reading up to 15,000 pages per month, because my overall goal for the year is to read 180,000 pages for the year. So definitely fell quite short of that goal. So yeah, I'm gonna have to figure out a way to like catch up and to do better next month. When it comes to audiobook minutes, I didn't read any audiobooks because I'm not really an audiobook girly. I am thinking of maybe kind of trying to do like immersive reading in February and, you know, consuming audiobooks in that way, because any other way I just can't focus and pay attention and get into the audiobook. So maybe this stat will change next month. My average rating was a 4.0, which is good. I would say that I had a pretty good reading month, and the majority of the books that I read I did enjoy, as I had, I do believe, 6 5-star reads this past month. Total DNFs, no DNFs. Total rereads, I didn't reread anything, and I purchased and acquired 6 new books. When it comes to reading total new releases, I did not read any 2025 new releases. Most of the new releases that I were reading were from 2024, and I didn't want to count them as new releases for this year. So yeah, 0 new releases. Books from total number of books I read from the series, I read 5 books from 5 different series. Total standalones, I read 9 standalones. Total books that I owned and that came from my physical TBR were 2. So definitely want to improve this stat next month. Total number that I borrowed. So while I want to improve the dent that I'm making in my physical TBR, I am actually very glad and proud that my total borrowed is a very high number, because that number is 12. I borrowed a total of 12 books from the library, and I do believe 1 book from Kindle Unlimited, and I do like that this number is high. I just need to find a way to balance it so that I'm still consuming and reading books on my physical TBR and kind of bringing that down. When it comes to the most read formats, I have mostly been reading hardcover books. And when it comes to the most quotable book, I would give that to The Champagne Letters by Kate McIntosh. That book, to me, there was just so many different things that just felt really true in regards to feminism and in regards to female empowerment, in regards to what it is to be a woman, what it is to kind of grow and live and age as a woman. It was so totally relatable. And I did pull tons of quotes from that book. When it came to the most read genres, this was a tie. That was between fantasy and mystery thriller. Those were the two genres that I was picking up the most in and reading from the most in January. My highest and lowest ratings. So my highest ratings, I had again 6 5-star reads. So that was my highest rating. My lowest rating was 2.5. I did have a couple of 2.5 reads, unfortunately, in the month. My most read source was, of course, the library. The shortest read and the length of that book that I read this past month was Set My Heart on Fire, which was 192 pages. And the longest read and the length was Hexed, which came in at 544 pages. So that's just a couple of my stats from the month. Now let us jump into the books that I read. Okay, let's talk about the first book that I read in January, which is Set My Heart on Fire by Izumi Suzuki. And I'm gonna be referencing my book journal and my tracker because like, I can't remember everything and I have so many thoughts for these books, and I'm really working to be more succinct in these videos so that I'm not just yapping and yapping and yapping. So yeah. So in Set My Heart on Fire, basically this is about a young woman in her 20s who lives a life immersed in the punk club scene in 70s Tokyo and a blur of drugs, men, and music. And I want to say that I liked this book, even though it was very nihilistic, it was very dark, and the main character, she was not likable. I did not find her to be a likable or redeemable character. She was very, in a way, self-absorbed, but there was of course reasons as to why she presented and why she was the way that she was that I could understand. And she was just very dark and depressing, and it was heavy, a lot of the themes that it kind of concerned with her. And while I appreciated that, because I love literary fiction, right? I love reading about the dark and more depraved and more uncomfortable elements of human nature and exploring that in a story. And I didn't have an issue with that or the topic or the subject matter. My only issues was kind of with how it was presented. I do feel like there were a lot of key elements missing in these short little vignettes that could have helped us to better understand the full scope of what was going on. It kind of, told this story in bits and pieces and jumped around throughout time. And that was a little disconcerting and made it feel a little bit disjointed. I also felt that there was no kind of character arc. There was no, I felt, greater purpose or kind of point that this story was actually like making, giving us an experience where we could actually like understand something, that we could actually kind of get some greater meaning from what was going on, what was happening in the story with the main character. And that for me just made it fall flat. It made it feel like, what was the point of reading all this darkness and toxicity and this depth if we're just gonna leave me with like a bunch of heavy feelings and no way to like sift through and to understand and to make sense of it all. It was just like a story for the sake of a story, and I did not like that. I usually like literary fiction that maybe doesn't give me a satisfying conclusion, but that does give me like a point, or that does illustrate a character arc or some kind of change, some kind of growth. Something, even if it's negative. I just want to see something or a person progress from one mindset and one state to another. And I did not get this from this story, unfortunately. So I gave it a 2.5. Next up, we have The Dagger and the Flame by Catherine, what is her name? By Catherine Doyle. And I really enjoyed this book. It was really fun and it was really fantastic. So this book is about a city torn apart by dark magic, with two rival orders and a young girl, Seraphine, fleeing from danger and the assassin who mercilessly takes her. But Sarah has a powerful new magic that threatens to disrupt the power in Fantôme. And when I tell you that this story was so fun, so interesting to me. I loved Seraphine as a main character. I felt she was spunky. I felt she was very independent. I felt that despite a lot of what she went through, despite the fact that she was grieving and dealing with grief in this story for, you know, the loss of her life the way that it was before, and the events that transpired that forced her into this position of fleeing from her home and not being able to return, and turning to essentially the cloaks for help, for assistance, for like a safe place to land after these events transpired, and being hunted by an assassin. I don't know, I just felt that she was just such a strong character, very independent, strong-willed, very courageous, very brave, and she, when faced with adversity, she never shrinked back from doing what needed to be done to just defend her right to pursue the life that she wanted to pursue and to make her world and make her life safe. And I liked that. I think that's why I enjoyed and I liked this book so much. When it came to the romance, that was a little bit interesting to me. It was an enemies to lover romance kind of a thing, and that was fine. The romance to me was like fine. It was interesting. Like, I have nothing, my issues with, and I don't really have issues with this book. It was a fine book to me. It was a good fantasy. I thought the world building was very interesting, very unique with their magic system and the way this world is like detailed and explained. It wasn't too info dumpy. I think that there were a couple of scenes or a couple of parts where we did do a little bit of info dumping, but it wasn't to the extreme where it detracted from your enjoyment of the story. So I felt that it was pretty good to me. The only thing that I did not like, and this has nothing to do again with the structure of the story or any of that, when it comes to the content, the plot development or any of that. I don't really have like key issues with those elements. I'm just talking just purely off of like reader experience. Ransom, to me, I don't like him anymore as a love interest, and I want to see how this story progresses in the next book that's coming out in this series, because this is book 1. I want to see where we go from here, because I do not like this man. When I tell you that I disagree with his actions and his beliefs and the way that he was towards the tail end of this story, at about like the I would say the 20% onward mark before this story concluded, I did not like him. And it kind of involves this trope that I don't necessarily like when a male or when characters take, or their love interests take, to better help and serve and protect their love interests. They will make these kind of like single-handed decisions and do these things and be like this martyr, and I didn't like it. I didn't like how that played out, and I do not want them together anymore because of his thoughts and like where they were and like how he responded and how he reacted to the situation. So I'm interested to see where their little romance leads. I hope she goes someplace else. I really hope that. Or something, he does something to redeem himself, because right now, not a fan. But other than that, had a good time with this book. I gave it 4.25 stars. And yeah, I'm excited to read the next book in the series. The book that I finished was Prey by Hilary Norman. And then this book, I don't know. Anyways, it's about 1940s London during World War II. A killer stalks the streets, targeting women with red hair. And one fateful night, Harriet becomes a victim, narrowly escaping. Flash forward to 2019, when her great-granddaughter, Libby, faces a similar threat. So the premise of this book sounds really, really interesting and really, really good. And it starts off as a very fast-paced story, and it's clicking. We're getting the killer's point of view, we're getting Harriet's point of view, and how everything kind of happens and culminates and collides into this one event and that one night where Harriet's life and livelihood is threatened, and how she escapes and how she moves forward. And again, it was snappy, it was slick, it was fast. My only complaint though is, again, I felt Harriet was kind of dumb, and I just can't reconcile when, especially in like mysteries and thrillers, when we make the character overly dumb. And the reason I don't like that is because I feel like you can still create a story that is thrilling, and where you can cause situations and problems for your character that places them in these situations that basically moves the plot forward without them being stupid. And we did not do this with Harriet. We didn't do it with Libby either. And a lot of what I felt transpired happened because she was like, lacked situational awareness, was a bit stubborn in regards to her safety, and, you know, just basic things that I felt were kind of like stupid. Nevertheless, I appreciated the first half and I enjoyed it very much. Then we cut to the last half of this story, where we're flashing forward to the future with Libby, her great-great-granddaughter. And this is where it starts to drag for me. This is where it becomes a little bit boring, and I'm trying to figure out like why this pacing became so like disjointed and uneven, because we were really fast in the beginning, and then we get to the tail ending and it slows down, and it's just all this stuff that's like happening, and we can't really tell or understand where were we. So basically I was saying I didn't understand why the switch up in the pace occurred, and why it just made it feel disjointed. It just made the story feel like awkward and kind of weird and out of step with what was happening beforehand. And again, I felt that with Libby, she was not the brightest bulb in the box. She was not the brightest. And she made a lot of dumb decisions, a lot of assumptions, and said a lot of things that just didn't make sense, and was really, I don't know, it was just weird how she was. And again, how due to her kind of like lack of situational awareness, gullibility, not finding things to be suspicious and odd when they are clearly suspicious and odd, and making choices based off of, I don't know, emotions and not thinking critically. I don't know. I felt for me that she came across as very dumb. And there were some things even in the end, as things were like coming to a conclusion and coming to an end, that she did that it made no sense. It made no absolute sense. And yeah, I don't know. It was not for me. I did not enjoy it. I wanted to DNF it, and I should have DNF'd it, to be completely and totally honest, but I didn't. And yeah, it is what it is. So for this one, I rated it, what did I rate it? I gave it a 2.35. Next up, I read In Our Likeness by Brian Van Dyke. And this story, it's when Graham helps his work crush and friend Nessie with the new algo. He discovers he can manipulate reality. He's thrust into a world where truth can be manufactured and must find a way to restore the past. And this was such an interesting book that's kind of studied and had discussions about like AI and the responsibility that comes with utilizing like AI and basically utilizing technology, the enormous responsibility that comes with that. And what happens when that responsibility isn't taken seriously and people just kind of do what they want to do, and they can in turn alter and change reality around us and manipulate truth to fit their needs and their will. And it was very interesting in this, and I liked the points that it was bringing up. I liked the exploration of this theme and this story, and I found it supremely enjoyable. However, the only couple of issues that I will say with this story that I experienced was when it came to truly exploring all of the different viewpoints involved in this tale and what was happening. We only get the viewpoint of Graham, and his limited viewpoint and his limited perspective is limited, as I just said. So we don't get the full scope of what actually is going on. I think if we would have been able to get like the viewpoint from Nessie and see things from her perspective, and we were also able to get the viewpoint from Warwick and see things from his perspective, we would have gotten a better, more complete picture of what was going on, so that the ending of this book would have made a lot more sense, and I felt it would have had a lot more of an emotional impact, and the reader wouldn't necessarily feel kind of like, what really just happened? I'm not sure that I understand everything. Because I think that when I finished this book, I did feel kind of like let down, because it was kind of an empty conclusion, because again, we didn't get all the facts and key pieces of information involving the other players of the story to be able to kind of have this ending make sense. So that is my only critique. Anyway, I gave this book a 4.5 rating, and yeah. So the next book that I read was The Champagne Letters by Kate McIntosh, and this was a book that I mentioned earlier was the one that I pulled the most quotes from, and yeah, I'll have to read you a couple of the quotes because they slap. But in this book, it is about a divorcee, Natalie, escapes to Paris, France to rediscover who she is and becomes enthralled with the story of widow winemaker Babette Nicole, drawing inspiration from her life to help her navigate the next phase of her life. And this book is set up to be a very inspirational, very female empowerment kind of book to kind of like inspire women that we are capable of and can do so much more, and that we have our own separate identity outside of that of our husbands, of our spouse, and that we can do amazing big things despite what society may say, despite what misogyny and sexism says. We are capable of amazing and great things. And when it comes to the theme, when it comes to that topic, I love this story. However, it kind of falls apart when we get to Natalie. So in this story, we're getting two alternating timelines with two viewpoints. We see the winemaker Babette Nicole Clicquot, and we kind of see her life as it unfolds following her husband's passing, and how she, in this time, in what was it, 1850s France? In that time period, how she has basically like no rights. Sexism and misogyny is like the culture, and society doesn't really expect women to do and be anything more than a mother and a wife and to run a household. And that was what you were shooting for in life. But she has big aspirations. She wants to like be a famous and well-renowned winemaker and create champagne, sparkling like wine and champagne. And she wants to dominate in that industry. And that was her and her husband's dream. And when he passed away, she didn't want to give up or relinquish that dream. And basically how she fought tooth and nail against society, against her family, against even her, preconceptions and thoughts about herself, to be able to accomplish that dream and to be successful. And I found her story to be so inspiring, so amazing, and her insights and her wisdom were unparalleled. Enjoyed it. However, when we get to Natalie's story and we're following her after her divorce, and she's realizing that she gave so much to this man, and she lost her identity and the sense of who she is, and she makes this rash decision to travel to France because she's going to make this her eat, pray, love trip, and it doesn't necessarily turn out the way that she expected because of the events that transpire and take place. But much of what transpires and takes place is because she is so gullible and she is so stupid that she gets herself in these very compromising situations because of her gullibility, her naivete, and her stupidity, and not being able to like utilize context clues to realize that something isn't right. And I think that is what made this so upsetting for me, is that her storyline was such a weaker element to this story in comparison to such a strong character and personality as Barbet Nicole. And so I guess I really take issue with the character being developed this way, because it doesn't ring true to what I would believe a woman who is in her early 50s and is recently divorced. I don't believe it matches up with how she would normally react and how she would be in that situation, considering her marriage ended due to infidelity and due to her husband wanting to be with another younger woman. And her actions and behaviors don't line up with a woman who went through something as traumatizing and upsetting as that she was so gullible around like men. It didn't add up to me. In my belief, and from what I would normally do, which I guess is what I'm basing it off of, and maybe I'm wrong for doing that, I would not be trusting of men. I would give them no time of day. They would be under the bottom of my boot. You hear me? So I wouldn't be necessarily eager to jump into a romance with another man. And I guess I would be questioning his intentions, especially if he was a younger man. I would be questioning his intentions. I would be curious as to why he was doing or saying or acting the way that he was acting. I would find it, basically I'm saying I would find him suspicious. And if you read this book and you see the event unfold, I think that you would see exactly what I'm talking about. That it doesn't make sense. It doesn't align with the woman who has been like betrayed in the worst ultimate way in marriage, to then be like, oh sure, you know what I mean? It doesn't line up. So the fact that her storyline, her character, her development as a character was so weak, made this story a little disjointed as well, because you just can't have such a strong, in my opinion, you can't have such a strong character as Barbara Nicole and pair her against this weak, kind of naive character as Natalie, and it makes sense. Yeah, so that for me is where it kind of went wrong in this story. Had she been written a lot differently and a lot more realistically, in my opinion, as to what a woman would truly be and act and think like in that situation, this story could have been a whole different thing. And her storyline could have like held its own against Barbara Nicole's and made for a very well-rounded and strong novel, but it just didn't do it for me. It didn't work. So I gave this book I think I gave it a 3.5. I gave it a 3.5 because again, it has so much potential, but it just fell flat for me when it came to Natalie and her storyline and just her character development. Next up, I read An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir, and I was so eager and excited to start this series, and I'm so glad that I did, because it was a phenomenal experience from beginning to end. And I'm on pins and needles, and I cannot wait until I can read A Torch Against the Night, because I'm just so excited for the next installment of the series. So the summary is Leia, an undercover spy for the Resistance, works to help rescue her brother Darren from the deadly Martial Empire, while Elias tussles with his hatred of the Martial Empire and his destiny to serve the system he hates. And yeah, when it comes to the world building in this story, it is impeccable to me. Tahir takes her time to really develop and craft this world to help you to understand kind of the system, the culture of everything. And I found that to be excellent. And another kind of thing that made this world building and kind of understanding the complexities of this world, of this, I guess, kind of like system or culture, is that we have Elia, who is a scholar and who is under rule and under the Martial Empire's rule. And we get to see what experience is like for a scholar under the Martial Empire. The kind of barbaric like the barbarism that is placed upon them and how they are treated as less, how they don't have as much rights and as much of a say, how like everything is just taken from them and they are just like brutalized and tormented for being scholars every single day of their life, and just how the quality of their life is so poor because of that, because of the ruling system and the powers that be that are in charge. We get to see that from Laya's experience. We also get to see how, or what makes the Martial Empire tick. What are their greater machinations? What are their standards? Like how life is for people that are, you know, marshals in this world, in this system, in this society, from Elias's point of view. And not only do we get to see what life is like on that side, as far as like how marshals kind of think and feel and move about society, and why they have this intense hatred of scholars, but we also see from Elias's viewpoint why it's so problematic. He is the one that we don't only get Laya's viewpoint of why it's problematic. We also get someone who's on the inside's viewpoint of why their system, the way that they have created and crafted their politics and their government, is so problematic and so oppressive to the scholars. And I found that to be a very interesting tactic for helping to build this world and to explain this system and this government and this culture and this society. I found that to be really, really crafty and really, really unique, and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoy about Tahir and her writing, and specifically about this novel, is that she does not hold her punches. She writes very emotional, impactful stories that pretty much places the characters, the main characters, the side characters, all the characters in very precarious situations, and she does it unapologetically, just showing the traumas and the realities of living in an oppressive society, the trauma and the reality of living in conflict within this society, and what that brings about, how people act, the darker kind of elements of their nature, and what happens when you are led and you're fueled by bigotry and by racism and by superiority and hierarchy, and what comes of all of these things and these thoughts and these beliefs about like yourself. And she explores those so very well, and she doesn't hold her punches. She does not hold back, and I personally enjoy that. It makes me feel and connect with the characters in such a deeper way, and it also creates such higher stakes, which makes a story in and of itself far more interesting when you are faced with these harsh realities and these harsh consequences for the things that these characters are doing, that they're basically placing themselves at risk over and over and over and over again. And we see that with Laya, we see that with Elias, that they keep continually, because of their ethos, because of their beliefs, and because they cannot tolerate the injustice of this system. They're constantly placing themselves in harm's way, and they do fall prey to these consequences. And I like that these characters are flawed. I like that these characters aren't necessarily like, you know how it's like the one trope where it's always a person in a fantasy story that's like the one that's going to like cure and like fix everything. And you sometimes in these stories, when that trope is like written, you never really get to see them fail or fall. Everything just kind of works out for them. It does not work out for them in this book. They're faced with a lot of frustrating situations and a lot of dark moments, and I really appreciate that. That made the story feel more real, feel more balanced, and really pulled and tugged at my heartstrings, and it was so much more emotional. So I gave this, of course, 5 fabulous stars, and looking forward to reading the next installment. Next up, I decided to read Bear Town by Frederick Bachman, not only because I've heard so many good things about this novel, but because it gave the perfect January winter vibes with the snowy backdrop on the cover, and I thought this is going to be a great experience. And it was a good experience, but it was the most heartbreaking book I have ever read, and I was crying like a child. It pulled out so many emotions. It's ridiculous. But in Bear Town, we basically, The story is about a small town struggles to rise from economic disaster using their successful hockey team as their ticket to putting their town on the map until a tragic incident changes everything. And I love the different themes that were present in this story. I love the exploration about community banding together for a common cause and like finding hope in something. In this case, it's their hockey team, that they're successful and that they're going to be able to like make changes in the town and just kind of help to build up their economy and do all of these great things until a tragic incident happens and everything changes, causing the town to go into sides and like become enemies and all the fallout that happens from that. And exploring the many nuances that comes from community, that comes through different relationships, that comes from holding people accountable, that comes from learning how to stand your ground and speak up and speak out against these matters, regardless of the fallout. But the importance of being on the side of truth, regardless of what happens, because it's more important to be truthful and it's more important to take a stand on certain things than it is to necessarily go with the flow, kind of see what happens. Because the only way to like make people accountable is to sometimes like take a stand and say no. And I really enjoyed the journey that this book will take you on. And again, it was very emotional. I cried a lot and it's very heavy, but I feel like it's such a necessary read in a lot of instances. And I really enjoyed this book. And I am looking forward to reading the second book in this series, which is Us Against You. And I gave this book 5 fabulous stars because, wow, what an amazing piece of literature. Next up, I read The Book of Doors by Gareth Brown. And I was a little nervous about reading this book because I've seen a lot of reviews where some people love it and some people do not love it. And I didn't know which camp that I was going to fall in. But I'm so glad that I took the chance to read this book because I loved it and I had a wonderful time with it. So in The Book of Doors, Cassie is a gifted and mysterious book that she later discovers is the Book of Doors and will lead her to anywhere she wants to go. She quickly finds that while magical this book is also dangerous, with people willing to kill for it. And this book was in and of itself a journey. I found the whole premise and the idea of books being these magical objects that can like gift you with these magical abilities and powers and that can like transcend and transform your life by taking you to different places or you becoming something different. I found that to be such an amazing idea and premise for a book, and I thought that it was executed in such an original and fresh way. I also felt that this book had this element of like sadness and tenderness and grief woven all throughout its story as it relates to Cassie, the main character, as it pertained to many of the characters in this story. We find them in different ways of like in stages of grief and processing some very traumatic and challenging things that they've witnessed and that have happened to them. And I found that exploration in the way that they were able to kind of reframe their lives, take a chance, create their own kind of found family. I found that to be very beautiful and very poignant. And I really empathized and related to Cassie and her story, especially when you learn more about her history and her background and how just tragedy and just, you know, disappointment and just loss seems to follow her continually throughout her story, and how in many ways it is her undoing, and we get to see the repercussions of that. And I don't know, I found this story to be very, very interesting and well written. I liked how all these different elements were connected and woven together, and how Gareth Brown took the time to explain everything to make it all make sense. He left no stone unturned. He really did link up and everything together so that it made so much sense, and you could see the madness and how everything was connected. I don't know. It was so well done and so well written for me. I'm glad that I read this book and I didn't pass it up. I gave it 5 fabulous stars, and yeah. Next up, we have The Chemist by Stephenie Meyer. And this was a very calculated risk to read because this is not her normal kind of shtick. She usually writes, as we know, young adult books that feature some kind of or type of paranormal, some may say toxic, problematic relationships, what have you. But that's usually her shtick. So this, an adult book that is kind of set to be a thriller, is a different speed for my girl. And yeah, we got what a time. So in this book, we follow chemist Juliana, who is in hiding from her former employer that tried to execute her for her knowledge of highly sensitive information, as she was responsible for interrogating suspects associated with terrorism. One of the associates with the department reaches out because they need her help in stopping a dangerous terrorist plot to utilize a biological weapon to harm millions of people. So that sounds interesting. It sounds all fine and dandy. But however, the problem with this book is that, true to Stephenie Meyer's fashion, she is not concise. She's never has been and never will be known for her brevity. I think that a lot of her books are very long and very drawn out, and this is no different. And for this to be, or supposed to be, a thriller, it definitely should have been a lot shorter than what it was. But I think the problem with this is, as always, she has to interweave a romance into this already convoluted plot, and that just made things even more drawn out and even more like long and whatever. And I think that was one of the issues that I really noticed, like right off the bat. She took too much time in the beginning explaining and detailing like every piece and every part of Juliana, and like how she was like hiding and the things that she was doing while she was on the run, and how she was just this bad bitch, and how she could she spent so much time detailing all of that. She could have made that more quick and more concise, and not spent like pages upon pages detailing her entire routine for what she did when she left home, what she did when she came home, how she slept. Like, I don't think that that was necessary to the story and the plot. Like, we get people want to kill her, and like we get that she has to protect herself, but I think that was extensive and that was too long. However, in the same vein as that, I think that she did not elaborate on a lot of things that I feel the reader would have preferred to know more information about, especially as we got closer to the end. You could tell that Meyer was getting tired of her own bullshit. You can tell that when we get to the end of the story, because she's rushing through everything. She's rushing through these key climactic moments and events to hurry up and wrap this stuff up and get to the end of the story. And that was when she should have taken the time to elaborate on these climactic events so that we could get the best and most beneficial emotional impact and could really help to bolster and improve this story. But she got it all backwards, all completely backwards. And again, when we come to this romance, I always will be a Twilight fan, and I know that a lot of people have issues and take issues with the romance in Twilight, as they should, and they have like some points. It's not the best. But I really saw this romance I felt was very problematic. And no, wait, I'm not gonna say this problematic. I'm gonna say that this romance for me wasn't believable. It wasn't very believable, and it wasn't giving for me. It was too odd. Yeah, I felt that this was odd. I felt that it wasn't grounded in reality. I felt that it was very insta-love, and that's strange coming from a person who I don't mind, and I like romances with insta-love. I don't mind them. I'm never mad at them. But this took the cake. I did not like it. And we spent so much time developing their freaking romance that it actually took you out of the core elements of the plot, which was the whole thing of this department trying to kill her. And that just interfered with the plot, and it became very convoluted, very confusing, and it became way too much and way too long, way too excessive. And to be honest, I don't even know why they were really trying to kill her. We didn't really get a good explanation for that. I still don't know why they were after her. I have not figured that out yet. Still trying to figure that one out. And yeah, I don't know. This just has so many issues. And another issue that I have to say is it's written like a young adult. So when I found out this was actually her adult debut, I'm like, girl, no. It was written very young adult. There is an intimate scene in this, and it is written very like chaste, very, I don't know, weird. And if you don't want to write a more detailed or sexually explicit scene, that's absolutely fine. You can do Fade to Black. You can, write it in such a way that it alludes to things. I don't know, you have so many options. But if you are going to write an intimate scene and you are gonna include that in your story, can you please just write an intimate scene and not try to be so like delicate with it? Because I think that makes it even more awkward. It makes it very, very, very awkward and very, very weird. And that's the vibes it was giving. Either you make a closed door or you actually go there. And I don't know, that in-between mess, it was not hitting. So this book was not the one for me. While the premise was interesting and I liked the idea that she was giving us and for this plot at the beginning, it didn't pan out. And I gave this 3 stars. Next up, we have Ghosts of Waikiki by Jennifer K. Morita, and I enjoyed this very fun and atmospheric mystery. So Maya, working as a ghostwriter for the prestigious and wealthy Hamiltons, finds herself thrust into a murder investigation after her employer's father is murdered. As if that's not enough, her ex-Koa is lead detective on the case. This book was so atmospheric, it was so flippin' fun, and I really enjoyed it. It was very well written, and it was a debut novel, and I think that she did a very good job with this mystery. She balanced elements from the kind of mystery of the key plot of what was going on in regards to the murder with some of Maya's kind of things that were going on in her life, and more of like a contemporary kind of feel to the story, where we're talking about her possibly relocating back to Hawaii and Waikiki, as she's been living in California for many, many years, and she just came back here for this ghostwriting job, and she's supposed to be temporary, but her family and her friends really want her back and to really have a better relationship with her. And we see her tussling with that. We see her tussling with, her feelings for her ex, and that being the reason that initially she moved away to California was because of their breakup, and how that was so upsetting and traumatic for her, and how in reality she really isn't even actually over what transpired between them. And I honestly think that neither of them were. And we get to see a lot of that in the story as well, but it's balanced in such a way that it doesn't take away from the main key element of the story, which is of course the murder and the mystery surrounding that murder and what's actually really going on at the core. And I found that to be, it was well done, well written, very fun. I will say that this is a very perfect and ideal book for someone who is new to the mystery thriller genre, and that is wanting to step their toe into this, and they don't want something that's going to be too overwhelming and a bit too much for them, but that's going to be the right perfect speed, and that's going to kind of help guide them along through the process of kind of figuring out and solving a mystery, and kind of lead them on from clue to clue to clue. This is ideal. This is perfect for people new to the mystery genre, I think, and that they will really find this very exciting and very fun. So I gave this book 4.5 stars. I truly loved it. It was great, and I'm looking forward to reading more works from Miss Jennifer K. Morita in the future. So I finally got my hands on One Dark Window by Rachel Gilliag. I am the last to join this bandwagon, and I am so excited that I did join this bandwagon, because I had an amazing time with this gothic atmospheric fantasy. So Elspeth is infected with magic in a kingdom where it's illegal and forced to live in secret. That is, until Raven Yu discovers her magic and enlists her help to save his brother's life and overthrow a broken system. So, again, I loved all the elements of the story. When it comes to the world building, I thought it was phenomenally done and it was terrific. The idea for the magic system being the Providence cards, and that's the magic system that the people used in this kingdom. I thought that was such a cool and fun play on like tarot cards, and I thought that it was so interesting and compelling how they were able to use the magic and the rules surrounding the magic system. It was very detailed, very well thought out. I loved it. I simply loved it. I also found this to be super atmospheric, and it gave all the good gothic vibes, which I love a good gothic fantasy. I love a good gothic story. And this one delivered on those vibes, especially as you consider when it comes to the mist and the gray and all of that. It just felt so, it was perfect. And I really enjoyed it. I had a good time with it. I also really enjoyed Elspeth. I found her to be, again, a very spunky, charismatic character. And again, her actions and the way that she thought and the way that she behaved and the way that she lived her life made sense for her unique situation, made sense for all the things that she has been through, for her to act and present herself in that kind of way. It tracked with her past and with her history, and it made sense. The same thing as it did with Raven Yu. I felt like a lot of the ways that he was and he presented himself and all of those things, I felt like for the characters, it all made sense for who they were. So the characterization and the character development, in my opinion, was excellent. It was such a good job. It was so believable and it made sense. I also like that she didn't just take her time and just do info dumping in order to help build this world, build this society, and build this kingdom. We get to learn about it through bits and pieces as the story unfolds, and we get to see it in different ways and different stages and become more acclimated and have a better understanding or grip on this world and this society and this magic system and actually what's going on and what's at stake. I really appreciated that. When it comes to the romance, I felt that that was also very well done. It didn't overtake the story. It was a little part of the story, and I don't know, it felt believable and real to me, these two people kind of connecting and coming together. I thought that it was perfect. It made sense. Like everything in the story made sense. It was structured and executed so well. I really enjoyed it, and I gave it 5 fabulous stars, and I'm looking forward to reading the final book in the series, which I think is 2 Twisted Crowns. I'm excited to be able to read that soon. Next up, we have Hexed by Emily McIntyre. This is going to be my second foray into the dark romance genre, and oh boy, was it a silly, goofy time. It was. In Hex, we follow a forbidden mafia romance where Vanessa falls for her cousin's fiance, Enzo Marino. Will they allow family loyalty and duty to keep them apart? So, I loved it. I loved it. I was rooting for these people, these morally, I don't know if we can even say they were morally gray. I feel like they were just, I don't know, they were a little dark. But I was rooting for these people. I was rooting for them. I was rooting for a mafia guy. I was like, sure, go ahead, take care of your business. Do what you should, king. Do what you should, queen. I was all about it. It was so fun in a way that when you read a contemporary romance, it does not carry the same energy because the stakes were so much higher, so much concentrated. It was so much more believable. And again, the romance, it was being a forbidden romance. I felt that it was like perfect because I felt how forbidden it actually was in the context of this world, and it made sense to me. And again, it just, the stakes, it felt so high. It was so intense. It was anxiety inducing. And the inclusion of this kind of little like mystery and all the secrets that were kind of like folded into the story, it was so interesting, really intriguing. It kept me like turning and flipping the pages. I could not stop. I was so involved in the story and the outcome and what happened. The romance was spicy, it was fun, it was flirty, it was sexy. It's everything that you want from, I would say, a dark romance, I would say. I really enjoyed my time with it. Vanessa and Enzo are my new favorite fictional couple, and I am really looking forward to reading more books from the Never After series, because if they are as the slightest bit as good as this one, it will be a guaranteed fun time. So I gave this book 5 fabulous stars, and yeah. Next up, we have Society of Lies by Lauren Ling Brown, and I have been highly anticipating this book since it was released back in October. Sitting on pins and needles, could not wait for my hold in the library to come through to read this book. And after reading this book, I am so immensely disappointed in what happened. So in Society of Lies, it's about Maya's younger sister is murdered, and as she searches for the truth, she discovers her sister's investigation into a former student's death, and the secrets Maya has hidden may have led to her murder. So this has all the makings of a dark academia book. The vibes were there, the secret societies, all of that, the prestigious school. It was perfect. It was on point to be a lovely and fun dark academia novel. However, again, another issue, we have very stupid, gullible, naive characters. And I can't, y'all. I can't with these characters being like so naive and flipping stupid. I just cannot. That was a good portion of the problem for me, was the character development was awful. Maya was very stupid and emotional, and like, I can get being emotional. Your sister was just found murdered. Totally valid. But the way that the grief hit her, it made her deaf, dumb, and blind, because the girl was so naive and gullible. But it wasn't just after her sister's death, though. It was back when she was at that same school and she was in the secret society, that she was also dumb and gullible. And I know a lot of this has to do with the themes of wanting to belong, wanting to elevate yourself and get a leg up, especially when you are, and this woman is biracial, she's half Asian, half black, especially when you are biracial or you are a person of color or a minority, you want to involve yourself with these like societies and these people in these spaces and places because of where they can take you, and it gives you a leg up. And for her, it was all about providing a better life for Naomi. But again, I don't think that should lead you to make the level of dumb decisions and mistakes that she made, and being so naive and gullible and just doing whatever and letting people manipulate and use her. Like, I feel like because you are a biracial woman in America in a higher education, a prestigious school where the dominating or the majority of people are going to be white, upper class people, that would make you a bit smarter and a bit more selective over what you aligned yourself with and what you did. Basically what I'm saying is, I feel like that should make you want to use the society to your benefit and not let the society use you to their benefit. And that just wasn't what her energy was. And that again caused her to get put into situations and in spaces and in places that were catastrophic and that were more damaging to her. And her friendships to me don't make sense. Her friends were hella shady to me, gave all the red flags to me, and I couldn't see how she didn't see them waving. And when it comes to Naomi, I won't say that she was all the way stupid. I think she was gullible when it comes to her romantic relationships. She was gullible and stupid there and didn't kind of like see the red flags and read the room. And that didn't help her a lot. Also, I felt like her reluctance to like communicate with Maya and for both of them to communicate with each other also caused much of the catastrophic events that happened in this story. And it was frustrating, because all of these elements just made for a frustrating reading experience and story. Another thing that I hated is that I was able to figure out or to spot things happening in the plot, happening in the story, happening with characters, whereas the main character was oblivious. It was clear as day. And sometimes she would even make the statement that she knew something was off and would proceed as if nothing was off. And that was like frustrating to see, like her 10 chapters later, found like, oh, so it was very frustrating. That drove me insane. And yeah. Also, when it came to some elements of the plot, especially pertaining to the conclusion, things weren't necessarily properly wrapped up and like the dots weren't connected to have everything create a full picture and make sense. And that was also very maddening and frustrating. And also a lot of things that happened did not make sense for the characters, did not make sense for the situation. It just didn't like make sense, period. So I ended up giving Society of Lies 3 stars because yeah, it was not the wow success that I was hoping it would be. And the final book that I read in January was Color Television by Danzy Senna. And this made it to be my book of the month for January 2025 because this book was amazing. When I literally finished it, I was staring at the wall trying to figure out what the hell just happened. And it took me 2 days to properly like dissect and to like process and digest this book and kind of reach a conclusion of what my rating was going to be and how I even felt about the book, because it was the way that it altered my brain chemistry is wild. Yeah, I really enjoyed the story. So in this story, we learn about Jane, who is taking a year-long sabbatical from her teaching job to publish her second novel, an epic detailing the history of mulatto people in America. When this falls through, she's forced to pivot and reevaluate what truly matters to her. There's an endless fount of themes present in this novel that you definitely want to take your time to kind of read and digest and process this book, as I feel like every other sentence there was a profound statement that could just send you on like a thought spiral, thinking about different things and like thinking about what this sentence, this statement was referring to. And I love that. I love a book that makes me think. I love a book that kind of shakes up my perspective. And this definitely did, as we were exploring racial identity in light of a person who is of course biracial, or a mulatto as the term that she uses in this book. And we kind of see kind of her experience with that and how that kind of has impacted the way that she sees herself, the way that she views herself. We also see about, what it comes to, or what it is to be a true artist, as opposed to being a sellout or being commercial and creating art in a commercial sense to kind of pander to people, pander to society, instead of kind of like being on the pulse of directing people to what is important and kind of taking that stance when it comes to art and being true to the art and what you're creating, instead of pandering to people and being true to what they want you to create, because oftentimes people don't really know what they want until you kind of tell them what actually matters. And that was an interesting conversation. We see some elements and some issues kind of like when it comes to women, when they want to advance and grow in their career as they are wives and mothers and having to like raise and rear children and run a household, and they're not necessarily getting support from their husband or their spouse, and how this kind of pertains to this view of misogynistic sexist attitude, as well as how this kind of plays an issue and kind of becomes real and manifested as part of like class and like your wealth and your status in those areas. There was a little bit of discussions about that. I don't know. There's also some discussions about ambition and the risks people are willing to take in order to get ahead, how you will quickly adjust your morals and adjust your beliefs in order to move ahead and to get ahead, because you want a piece of the metaphorical pie. You want to elevate yourself above your station. You want to pursue and reach heights of success for yourself in your career and in your aspirations. And we explore all of these things in such a stunning and just enlightening way. And when it comes to the characters and character development, I don't think that any of these characters, again, were likable. I don't necessarily feel like Jane was likable. She was very freaking questionable at many points throughout the story. I didn't feel her husband Lenny was likable. I felt that he was just like, I felt he was also a little problematic in a lot of ways. They were both problematic. They did come across a little bit as pretentious to me, especially as it pertains to like what is real art, and like you don't want to be like that because that's not real art when it comes to comparing themselves to other people, other artists, other creators, and just kind of like that level of pretension because of being intellectual and being above it all. And that was a little irritating at times as well, but it falls in line with the overall story. It falls in line with this kind of character study of Jane, and it was very interesting, very telling. I found that a lot of the things that happened towards the end was very, very ironic considering how Jane's mindset was and her thought process was in the beginning, and how willing and ambitious she was to go after what she wanted. I found that to be very interesting and very ironic, and I don't know, I found this story to be very entertaining and very thought-provoking, and I enjoyed it. I loved it. I'm looking forward to reading more works from Danzy Senna, because if this is any indication of what I will get, I am here for it. And yeah, what a phenomenal book. I gave it. So those are all of the 14 books that I read in January. I would say that I had a phenomenal reading month, and I am so looking forward to February because I think it's going to be even better. I have a lot of good books on deck, a lot of fantasy, and I'm so excited. So until next time, I hope you have a wonderful day and happy reading. Bye.